Hey there, I'm Carl Thiel and we're here with Film.Music.Media. We're going to be talking about Seis Manos and a bunch of other fun stuff.
Well, Carl, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting. It's so great to see you again. It's great.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. We did an interview on the phone or on Skype a while ago, but it's so great to be in person.
Likewise.
And I know you're in Austin, so it's just great that you're in town, that we can sync up like this.
Well, actually, I'm now kind of bi-coastal, if you want.
Oh.
If you can call Austin a coast,
Yeah,
right?
I think you can get your own coast, sure.
Right, sure. No, I just recently got a place in Burbank. That's actually why I'm here.
All right.
So,
We're neighbors
yeah.
then.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start off. Let's kind of start fresh. I know we talked about, a few years ago we did that interview, but let's just start and I want to refresh kind of your background and your intro and kind of reflect back to, I guess, your childhood growing up. And I know you had a very interesting childhood. Your parents and all this diversity kind of in your life growing up in Mexico. Talk about those influences and what kind of were the first moments you started noticing music kind of seeping into your life.
Sure. Well, music has always been a part of my life. Growing up in Mexico, I grew up in Mexico City, and my dad was a concert pianist. And by the time I was born, he kind of led that life, and he became an entrepreneur. But at home, he always played piano. So every night before dinner, he'd play piano, and he'd play Mozart and Bach and Beethoven, and I just was enchanted by that. By the time I was 6 years old, I told my mom, "Hey, I want to play like Dad." And so she got me private lessons with a wonderful professor from the Mexico City Conservatory. And I basically started, practicing classical music at 6 years old. And I loved that. I really, really enjoyed it. It was very fulfilling. I went through that for about 4 years, practicing every day, doing that kind of thing, really disciplined. Then by the time I got to be about 11, I kind of got tired of it. I kind of wanted to do my own thing. And so I kind of let go of the official lessons. And I kind of didn't play for a while. And within a few months, I really started missing it. My sister and my brother are older than I am. And they would play, Beatles albums. They were playing the Carpenters and things like that.
Right.
And I really enjoy that too. So I decided to start picking it up again on my own, just playing, pop music. So I got Beatles books and I started learning that stuff. It was really fulfilled me. And I also started writing just by ear. I started writing, just fun pieces, short pieces for fun.
Yeah.
I didn't really have the concept of recording or writing them or anything like that. I just kind of noodling on the piano, coming up with pieces that I would play with friends, and they would really enjoy it. So that was fulfilling. Later on, when I was in high school, I went to high school in Canada. I was really still in love with music. I never really thought music was going to be, my
career.
My career.
Right.
I thought it was going to be my hobby.
Yeah.
But I always had it was a big part of my life throughout my whole life. So while I was in Canada, I was studying the arts. I was doing a lot of painting too, and I also took some harmony and composition in school. And the music teacher actually. I convinced him to get a Rhodes keyboard and a couple of synthesizers, so that we could play. And formed a little high school band, and performed a couple of dances, and that was a lot of fun. It was really a lot of fun, and all the time thinking, I really want to be a filmmaker. And so I was also filming, and I had a VHS camera and editing it, playing the cassette player and playing the, adding the audio and dubbing. It's like
I did that. Yeah,
crazy.
I remember that.
So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I was kind of straddling those two worlds. When I went to college, I studied RTF at UT in Austin. Quite coincidentally, pretty contemporarily with Robert Rodríguez. I did not know him at the time. I was familiar with Los Hooligans, his comic strip.
Yeah.
But I didn't know who he was or what he was doing. I just kind of was familiar with his comic strip. So that came about later in my life.
Right.
But during that time, as I was studying to be a filmmaker in my head, I started doing some internships and PA work, commercial productions that were happening around town, to learn. I was working as a PA on the set, and a couple of movies that were shot in Austin. I also participated. One of them was The what was it? The Hot Spot, directed by Dennis Hopper.
Oh,
With Don Johnson, Virginia Madsen.
Right, I saw that on your IMDb.
Yes, I was actually a PA on that, and so that was a lot of fun. But anyway, throughout all that process, I got to meet all the people that were, the directors and the producers that were making decisions as to who was going to do the music for these commercials at first, And so it dawned on me, because I was playing with bands and I was buying little recording equipment. I had a 4-track, I had a synthesizer. And it dawned on me, it's like, I could write music for this kind of stuff, this would be fun. And so I made this little demo reel on a cassette, 4-track, of fake commercials, radio commercials.
Yeah.
And I wrote music to them, I scored them. And so I passed that around to a lot of the different people that I had met. And eventually I got a break. One of these companies, they were looking for a composer and they asked me, it's like, hey, you want to try this out? And it's like, of course, that'd be great. And it was a really low budget project. It was a 30-second commercial for one of those 1-900 calls, aired overnight, But
the sexy calls?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I didn't use a wah-wah, but it could have very well been one of those, right? But I got paid very little.
Yeah.
But it was the first time that somebody actually paid me money to write music.
Wow.
And that was very fulfilling, And then when I saw it on TV, I was like, there it is, that's my music. And I heard it, I was like hooked.
That's
amazing. This is awesome. This is so cool. Yeah. So I kept doing it. That company kept hiring me. They were happy with what I had done. So I did more of that. And that opened the door to more reputable agencies. I worked a lot with GSD&M, which is one of the bigger agencies that just happens to be in Austin. We did a lot of Walmarts at the time. With the Texas Lottery, we won the account with a jingle that I wrote.
That's right, yeah.
And then after that, I did some Subaru commercials, some Volkswagen commercials, And that was a great education for me because, those turnarounds are usually very quick. You have to do these things, within 24 hours. And not only was was it a good education into how to be creative on demand, it was also a great exercise in being flexible creatively. Because one day they'll want a ranchera for a beer commercial, and the next day they'll want an orchestral piece for a car commercial.
Right.
And so, I would never say no. I would always say, yes, of course I know how to do that.
Right.
And immediately after hanging up, it's like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Right?
You say yes and then you figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so that was a great education, which I found later was very useful in, scoring longer format stuff. And it also opened the door to, more corporate videos.
Right.
And then, short documentaries. And eventually, I started dabbled in producing music for a larger feature films. I did a couple of things with Sandra Bullock in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Because you worked on like Miss Congeniality.
Miss Congeniality. Yeah. I produced one of the tracks that was featured in there, and that was great.
Yeah.
And Sandy was awesome. She was such a wonderful human being. And then I met Robert just by chance.
Yeah.
I met him at Antone's, which is a great bar, very well known blues bar in Austin, and I was there just visiting, one of my hangouts really.
Yeah.
Watching this performer was Patricia Vaughn, who later I found out was Robert's sister. And so I saw in the distance, hey, is that Robert? And it's like Robert's like I gotta go talk to him. And he had just, Spy Kids 1 had just been released.
Yeah.
And I had seen it with my son, who was at the time about 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I approached him and it's like, hey, you're Robert, right? And like, yes. And I told him, I was like, hey, I love, my son and I really love Spy Kids. He goes, oh, thank you. And I didn't really want to gush or anything.
Yeah, right.
I just kind of wanted to give him his props.
Yeah.
Well, later that evening, right around that time, I had just released an album that I produced for Monty Montgomery, who's a fantastic guitar player.
Yeah.
Really a virtuoso. And I was upstairs in the green room, and the label guy from that record was talking to Robert, and he looked at me and he was like, "Oh, Robert, you got to meet Carl. He's got an amazing studio, and he just did Monty Montgomery's record, and he did Bob Schneider's Lonely Land record. You guys need to meet each other." And he's like, "Hey, we just met downstairs, right?" So, it's like, "Hey, yeah, I'm looking for a studio to do work here." And I'm like, "Really? Well, here's my number." It's like, "Yeah, that'd be great." I never thought he'd call.
Right.
And within 2 weeks, I get a call. It's like, hey, this is Rodríguez. And I'm in the studio. It's like, Rodríguez? Could be Robert Rodríguez? You know? It's like, yeah, I want to come check out your studio. And like, okay, I'm here. Come on. And 15 minutes later, open the door. There he is.
Wow.
So and he's like, yeah, I'm doing this Spy Kids 2. I want to do this the end credits track. He basically just gave me here's kind of the melody of it. Let's put it together.
Yeah.
So we worked together on it. I produced it. We brought in Alexa Vega to sing.
Yeah.
And that was the first time we collaborated on something, and that opened the door to pretty much everything he's done since then.
Yeah, since then you were on. Yeah.
First producing his music, and as we did a couple of movies, told me, I also write. And so he's like, oh, here's a couple of cues, try those,
Yeah.
And slowly he started giving me more responsibility on the writing side.
Right.
To the point where when we got to Spy Kids 4 and Shorts and Machete Kills and Machete, I ended up writing a lot of the music.
Yeah, you guys were essentially co-composing with him. Yeah.
Exactly. And, it's also partly, he started getting a lot busier.
Yeah.
So lucky for me, he's too busy to write a lot, so I get to carry a little bit more of that weight.
Yeah.
And it was great education for me. Robert is very generous with his time when we're working together, and I learned a lot from him, and I still learn every time I work with him. So I'm very grateful for that relationship.
Yeah.
And that, of course, has opened the door to a lot of other projecks.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was your path to kind of bring you up to speed. But let's rewind a little bit, because I'm really fascinated because your parents were not born in Mexico.
Right.
Yeah, your parents are both European and different nationalities, right?
Yes, that's right. My dad was Swedish. He was born and raised in Sweden. Mm-hmm. He came to Mexico as an adult. My mom was born in Mexico, but her parents immigrated to Mexico. Her dad was Austrian and her mom was German. So and I was born in Mexico. We spoke Spanish.
Right.
It's our first language. My parents would speak in Swedish whenever they didn't want us to understand what they were saying. So it's a very, very mixed. It's a mixed salad of
because I grew up. My dad is Turkish. My mom is Polish, and then I grew up here. So it's kind of like but I think from that you gain so much perspective and different viewpoints. And I know my parents' different music tastes have influenced my tastes. Right. And then of course you're growing up in Mexico where music is such a huge part of the culture.
Right.
So I guess when did you start realizing what your musical identity was? Like how did
I think I'm still defining that.
Still finding that?
I try not to get pigeonholed in a particular style. I feel like every time I work on a new project, I want to try and bring in a new perspective to it, either by getting a new instrument that I've never played before, just to learn that, or learning new modes or new chord progressions and things like that. But to your point, yes, growing up in Mexico was an incredible gift musically.
Yeah.
Because there's so much, so much music everywhere you turn, and it's a cultural melting pot.
Yeah.
You have, the indigenous music from, the ancient Aztecs and Mayans, and that's still being played today. And then you have the imports from Spain, the Spanish guitars, and then the German influence with the accordions and the mariachis, which are influenced by the French. So all of that, you have all these different cultures basically blending into these new modes of music that are now considered Mexican music. And then on top of that, the classical stuff that I learned from my dad, and and my mom would listen to Vivaldi all the time, and Strauss. She was a big fan of the waltzes,
right.
And so I would listen to those all the time growing up, So and my brother and my sister, going more for the pop route, listening to what was out at the time, Chicago and Carpenters, as we said, the Beatles, of course, and I love that.
So you had your upbringing there, and then you mentioned, of course, you went to high school in Canada, and then coming for college in Austin. Was that change of scenery? I mean, that's a big change of scenery. Was that drastic for you? Did you handle that well, or was it more intimidating? Or
going to Canada was the most challenging thing I've had to encounter. But it was also the best thing that's ever happened to me. Because I grew up in Mexico in the same school from kindergarten all the way to middle school, with the same friends, the same group of people, and it was a co-ed school. So having had that experience all my formative years with this core group of people. Then all of a sudden I'm in a boarding school,
right.
You know, in a completely different culture. There's no girls.
Yeah.
I'm in a tiny town where there's nothing to do but be in the school, and you can't leave. I'm boarding in there, you know, and
right.
so let's put it this way. In Mexico, I was kind of the popular clown, you know, C average student, right?
Right.
In Canada, it's like, well, I don't have any distractions. There's no girls. There's nothing else to do. So I kind of became an A student. I got really into the studies. And I also, you know, I really wanted to explore the arts. The school that I was going to in Mexico did not have that much in the art department, either arts or music. You know, we took music classes, but they were like, eh.
Yeah.
And, you know, the arts was also kind of, you know, secondary.
Right.
But in Canada, there was a whole arts building, and they had a whole section just for painting and drawing and sculpture and everything you could possibly imagine. And in the music department, they had a whole set. They had like 5 piano practice rooms. You know, they had a concert. They had an actual orchestra room. So it was much more equipped to educate in the arts. And I became, you know, just devoted to those. So much so that both the music and the art teacher gave me the keys to the rooms. It's like, come in and do whenever you want, whenever you want. And the cool thing about this school is that they had the system that the better your grades, the more freedom they gave you. So
it's a good reward for students.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a way to entice students. Yeah.
So when I was there, you know, since I was getting such good grades, they just, you know, I didn't have to, you know, be restricted to my room and during study hours or anything like that. So I would go to the, you know, either the art room to paint, or I'd go to the piano rooms to practice. You know, since I had the keys, I could do that.
Yeah.
And so I really developed my skills as a musician by being there, and also writing music.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, after you moved to Austin, Austin has a huge music scene. Of course, it still is. It's still known as for its music.
Right.
So when you started working with Robert and you kind of got more into the filmmaking process, I guess talk about your how you collaborate with him. I mean, he's a filmmaker, but he's also a musician.
Right.
You kind of came from a filmmaking background, and also
Right.
So you guys have so much in common. So was it just easy to talk to him in terms of visuals and trying to capture things?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because, you know, I've shot a couple of short videos. I've done some music videos too, you know, and every time I have something, you know, I'll show it to him and he'll give me his pointers. Like, yeah, this is great, but maybe try changing the voiceover over here. You know, it's like, he just gives me tips. This is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of the music, you know, he's really a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
He is I mean, literally, he would do everything himself if he could.
Yeah.
And he'd be awesome.
Those first few films he did do everything.
Exactly. Well, you know, the first one, you know,
El
Mariachi, of course.
Of course, yeah.
That's the example they will use.
And he has a great book, Rebel Without a Crew,
Right.
which I read when I was in film school. So it's definitely, everyone should read that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great lesson in you know, overcoming you know, obstacles.
Right.
You know, if anybody tells him no, he proves them wrong.
Right.
And so I learned a lot from that too. His you know, outside the box thinking. You know, Austin is not really a film town per se. It's kind of become now a little bit more because of Robert.
Because of him,
the efforts of Robert and Richard Linklater and Terrence Malick.
Yeah.
Now people are like, oh yeah, we can respect what they're doing there. But Robert's been very adamant about doing as much as possible there, including post-production.
Right.
You know, he has his own soundstage to mix his own movies, and he was a pioneer in digital filmmaking.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, the Desperado. No, Once Upon a Time in Mexico was
one of the first ones
shot in digital.
Yeah.
And he was proving to people, it's like, hey, we can do it, and it looks great.
Yeah.
Right. And to be able to have the feedback on set, to show the actors exactly how it's going to look, rather than, oh yeah, here's the video playback.
Yeah, we have to develop and you know.
Right, exactly. They get to see it, and oh my God, yeah, let's do it again, and they get more of a feedback, direct feedback from the look,
right,
from the actual look, and so that was exciting, you know. And as far as the music conversation, we kind of developed obviously a shorthand, you know. After you work with somebody for a long period of time, I'm familiar with his tastes. I'm familiar with what he's looking for. And so the cool thing is when I send him demos of you know, cues or whatever, he'll speak to me in musical terms. you know, rather than colors or emotions, right?
Yeah.
He'll say, well, let's go to a minor over here, or you know, let's cut the bridge or whatever, you know, and in terms that I can understand clearly and concise. And he's really a good director about that,
Yeah.
you know, and I can see he translates that obviously when he directs actors as well. He's very specific about his direction. If you're paying attention and follow that direction, you know, you get exactly what he wants.
And when you guys are on those co-compose collaborations, is he in the room with you when you guys are writing? Or does he? I know when he's doing his directing duties, he just kind of leave it to you to kind of figure things out.
Yeah, most of the time. In the beginning, we did do a little bit more in the room kind of a thing. You know, now it's more. I show up at his house. He shows me the cut. You know, if it's a film or whatever, you know, and he'll show me the scenes he wants me to work on, and I'll just take notes. Basically, a spotting session, right?
Yeah.
It's like a private spotting session. And then I'll go home and work, you know. And if he has themes that he's written, you know, he'll send me a one-liner, you know, said, this is the basic melody, use this in the scene, right? And so then out of that, I'll draw what needs to work, you know, and, block out the scene using those motifs.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it works. And now, you know, with internet, you know, we hardly ever see each other anymore. You know, it's all
Skype and all that. Yeah.
Even though we're 20 minutes apart, right?
Yeah. So you work with a lot of amazing filmmakers that really kind of push the boundaries of imagination and as a great comment, I mean, the kind of batshit insane qualities that's just really creative and just entertaining for the audience. So when you're working with Robert, who's pushing these different genres, whether it's film noir with, you know, Sin City or horror grindhouse with Planet Terror, I mean, how do you kind of what's the goal to finding the sound, or what's the approach to finding the sound?
Well, yeah, funny you mentioned that. When we were working on Planet Terror, you know, he's a big fan of John Carpenter. He's always been. And so he referenced The Fog, and he referenced the Escape from New York.
Yeah.
He says, we want to make it sound like those.
Yeah.
And so I did my research, I listened to the scores for those two, and, you know, at the time, Arturia was starting to make some really cool plugins that, you know, I researched exactly the synthesizers that John Carpenter was using for those.
Oh, nice.
And so I got the plugin versions of those, and, you know, the Prophet 5 and the Mini Moog and a couple others, you know. I just started toying with that, looking for that, and really analyzed his scores and kind of see what made him work so well, you know. And so that's how I approached that particular score. Because he wanted to make kind of an homage to that kind of style, obviously, you know. And so when we did Sin City 2, you know, I had the benefit of already having had the Sin City 1 with the wonderful scores from, you know, John Debney and Robert and Graham Revell.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that particular movie, the original, is that they each kind of tackled a different story.
That's right, different
so
story.
So they each had their own style, you know.
Right.
Graham Revell went for a little bit more of a modern, you know, psycho type of approach, right?
Yeah.
And John Debney went for a more classic film noir.
Right.
And so, having had those established in the first one, we kind of wanted to pay homage to those in the second one. And so, I already kind of had that baseline as far as what sound we were looking for. We created new themes for the new characters, and, you know, I borrowed some of the original motifs for the recurring characters.
Yeah.
So that was not that complicated.
Right.
We also only had about 5 weeks to put that one together, so that we had a pretty quick turnaround.
That's crazy.
So it's cool to be able to have that as a subset. I mean, as a foundation to build up on top.
Right.
As far as the other stuff, I can't remember what else you mentioned.
I mean, you mentioned Planet Terror, but then you have like Machete Kills, and then
Machete Kills. Well, you know, Machete Kills was born in Planet Terror in
That's
a
true.
grindhouse. You know,
Yeah.
It was just originally that
a trailer,
fake
a joke trailer
for a joke trailer, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was a piece that Tito Larriba had written. You know, for that trailer. And Robert liked that so much. It's like when we actually did the actual score, it's like we actually used that as the main theme for Machete.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of a trial and error. You know, we definitely wanted to be a guitar heavy theme for Danny Trejo's character.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I started writing that, you know, playing with the first couple of cues, you know, Robert had written the motif da da da, right?
Yeah.
Kind of the signature motif for Machete. So when I was playing it, you know, I was showing some cues to Robert. It's like, what do you think of this? It's like, no, it's got to be lower. It's got to be lower. You know. was playing on guitar. It's like, well, okay, let me tune it down. Tune it down. Try this. It's got to be lower. It's got to be lower. So I tried a baritone guitar, right? And I played it like that. Like 3 steps lower. Can we try a little lower? So I tuned down the baritone guitar to the lowest it possibly go.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's it. So it's like the guitar, the strings were barely tight enough to play, but that's the sound of Danny Trejo, like really low. And of course, on top of that, he's got the machete, so I wanted to make it sound real metallic. So I had a lot of cymbals and a lot of swishes that have that kind of metallic feel to them, to have that vibe, and I started adding some synthesizers that had an organic feel to them. And I was always looking for sounds that kind of had that grindhouse vibe, but also had kind of a signature feel that wasn't overly used prior, right?
Yeah.
And, right now we have such a wealth of amazing synthesizers and software synthesizers that are available to us. You can start with a stock sound and then modify it and, customize it to make it just right for what you need. And that's kind of how the whole sound of Machete came about.
That's awesome. And then, of course, you did From Dusk Till Dawn, the TV series, which you kind of like just took on your own, of course, based on the original film. Talk about, you also work on a little bit with Monty Montgomery on Last Man Standing.
Right.
Did a few, work on that. So talk about scoring for a television series. We can focus on From Dusk Till Dawn, but completely different than a 30-minute sitcom.
Right.
But talk about, we so people will remember the film, of course, but you're bringing it also to a new generation. It was also launching the El Rey network.
Exactly.
So Robert, was a kind of showrunner, produced it and directed a few episodes. What was it like building that soundscape, I guess? Were you borrowing from the film, or did you try to do something completely different?
Well, that's a great question. I did listen to the first film, the original film, to kind of see if there was anything we could borrow from that. And I tried kind of getting that approach. The first half of that film is mostly source music, songs, licensed music, and then it goes into orchestral the second half when we get to the vampire section. But I tried kind of going with a rock and roll vibe, and doing kind of a thing, there was like a couple of scenes, like the first scene that I tried, that we kind of started testing was when he goes with the scene where he goes like, "You be cool," right?
Yeah.
That whole section. And I tried first with like a groove, like a rock groove, and it was sounding cool, and it actually worked. But when Robert and I were discussing it, there's something missing. It's not tense enough. It's too familiar.
Yeah.
Really. And so he wanted the biggest part of his direction is like, I want to add tension and unease. I want the music to always be tense and unease. And so in order to do that, the minute you put some kind of melody, even if it's a dark melody, people kind of get attached to that, and it becomes comforting.
It is, yeah.
And so I decided, well, let's get rid of the melody. Let's just make it more rhythmic and tonal. And I try that with still keeping it organic, doing guitar swells and doing that kind of thing mixed in with the synthesizers, and just putting like a really kind of an organic electronic beat to it. And I showed it to Robert, like, that's it. We're gonna go with that.
Right.
And so that was kind of the first template of what direction we're gonna go with the score.
Yeah.
And we built on that. And of course, the seasons evolved. The first season takes place, the whole movie takes place the whole season, first season.
Right.
And then we take off into different worlds and different unexplored territory. And so we took some more liberties with the score as well as the story evolved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was 3 seasons.
Right.
Is there any chance it'll come back for a 4th one? Is there...
I have heard rumors. It comes and goes.
Because it was never announced as a cancellation. It was just kind of...
right. Yeah. So the last time I talked to Robert about it, and this was last year, he mentioned, we might do a little reunion.
That'd be good to come back. For maybe
exactly. Exactly.
It got really great reviews, and fans loved it. So it was a lot of it's a fun show. Yeah, so much fun. Just like the film. So let's jump to Seis Manos, which we've been talking about all these different multicultural diversity and kind of how you shaped yourself, and no better show that kind of represents a mixing of so many different genres and stuff as Seis Manos. So Seis Manos is hails from creators Brad Graeber and Álvaro Rodríguez. So Álvaro is Robert's cousin, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So
and he wrote Machete.
Yeah, he did write Machete as well. So talk about, I guess, being approached for this. I'm guessing Álvaro probably reached out to you. Or how did you get involved with this?
No, actually, I mean, funny enough, I had done some work with Powerhouse before.
Yeah, it's Powerhouse Animation.
Powerhouse Animation. Brad Graeber, who's the CEO and the creator of, as you mentioned, of Seis Manos. I had done some work with them in the past, about 10, 15 years ago, mid 2000s. A good friend of mine, Trevor Romaine, who's a children's book author.
Yes, yeah.
He does wonderful work for kids. You know, he really tackles very difficult subjects. You know, cancer and death, and writes these amazing books that are meant to bridge the gap between, you know, communication between parents and kids, to be able to have those, you know, open up the door to those conversations. And so, at one point, those were made into short videos, and Powerhouse was the company that did those. And so I scored them, thanks to Trevor, and that was my first introduction to Powerhouse.
Right.
So when Brad had this vision for Seis Manos, he invited me to score that. And it was actually, I was the one who introduced Álvaro to.
Oh, really? It's like you brought Álvaro on board.
Yeah, it's like, you know, because Brad was like, you know, I really have this awesome vision for this incredible show. He had the whole concept of it, you know, and it sounded incredible. You know, 3 orphans that are Mexican, that are adopted by a Chinese kung fu master. Because
how does one come up with?
Well, it's just, I don't know. You gotta ask
that imagination.
That's
Again, imagination. That's so, you know,
right?
yeah.
But you know, Brad is himself a martial artist. He's a black belt.
Oh wow!
He's
an
incredible student of the martial arts, and this is an important note. Every martial arts move in the show is very carefully, meticulously crafted to reflect the actual style of that particular character.
Wow!
So if anybody wants to learn martial arts, watch Seis Manos.
You can learn through animation.
Exactly. No, his Sifu came in, and they actually worked out the moves and how they were going to fight, and so each character has a different fighting style, and they're very, very true to that particular discipline. So that's a little side note that you get to know. Yeah. But back to what we're talking about. That's how I was introduced to the show. You know, Brad invited me to score it, and we did a preliminary proof of concept a few years ago for it, and it was only about a minute long. And I wrote, you know, I scored it. It was just kind of an action sequence. There was really no theme or anything like that. You just needed a score to go with it. And kind of a funny bit about that is when I wrote that, you know, I had this little motif, da 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 da, that just kind of happened incidentally. It was just kind of in passing little motif that was part of the scene, and I didn't think anything about it. I didn't think of it as a thematic, you know, thought or anything like that.
Right.
And later, when the show got greenlit, and I actually was tasked with actually writing a proper theme, I went back to listen to the original demo that we did for that little action scene. And you know, the characters had evolved. The story was a little bit different. The aesthetic was different. So the kind of vibe that I had written for the original demo didn't really fit the new look and the new characters. You know, like Jesus is a little chubbier. You know, there's a little bit more. I think they're more relatable characters, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, before they were a little too fantasy looking. And so I had to rewrite the whole thing from scratch. But that little motif, that ta-ta-ta-da-da, really stuck with me. And it's like, well, I'm going to try building on that. I'm going to write I'm going to kind of orchestrate the whole thing and write the piece based on that motif. And so is the theme that you heard earlier.
Yeah, and the main titles.
Exactly. And so I started with that, the flute at the top, and I decided, well, how can I blend Chinese and Mexican music? You know, because that was the basic 2 big elements that I need to put in. But we also got to make it sound like it's coming from the 70s. And it also has to have kind of a Blaxploitation vibe.
Yeah, it has all these elements.
It has to be action, you know, all these things.
Yeah.
And so I decided to try that motif over like a Wapango beat, which is a 6/8, right?
Yeah.
And an up-tempo thing. And with Western chord progression, you know, ta-ta-ta-da-da, ta-ta-ta-da-da, and moving chords. And then I you know, an acoustic nylon guitar, nylon acoustic, to kind of give it that propulsion.
Yeah.
But let's do kind of like taiko drums playing in the background, and let's add a wah-wah guitar so that it'll have the 70s vibe. or let's put some mariachi trumpets, you know, and but let's make the trumpets with Chinese harmonies, right? So you have all these different, I'm borrowing all these different musical elements from the different cultures.
Yeah.
And it just blended so magically, beautifully.
It did.
It really
it
works.
really works.
You know, so
it doesn't feel it doesn't feel like a mess or anything. It just all seamlessly works.
Right. Yeah. So I was really happy the way that came together.
Yeah. We're talking about the series, and it has all these different elements. So Álvaro, I was reading something that he was saying in some press, and he said that the series can be described as Machete meets Kill Bill on the set of Coco. Is that accurate?
I would say that's pretty accurate.
So yes. Yeah, we mentioned it was about 3 orphans, martial arts masters, but tell us the kind of premise of the story.
Well, you know, we enter the story when the orphans are already adults, right? They're young adults. Right. I would say maybe 17 to 19, right? And they're not really siblings by blood. They're siblings because they're adopted by the Chinese kung fu master.
Right.
And so that
takes place in Mexico.
It takes place in a small town, fictional small town in Mexico in the 70s.
Yes.
And so we start the story when they're already at that age, and they're already martial artists. They've learned that, and we see them learning from the teacher the art of the sin also. You know, so it's the yin and the yang. You know, yes, they're martial arts, but the martial arts are part of the life, but also the spiritual and meditative practices are also important in their education. And so, you know, we have 3 very different characters. You know, Isabella, who's the leader and moral compass of the 3, who's a wonderful character, played by Aislinn Derbez, you know, and she did a fantastic job. We have Jesus, who's kind of the drunken, cheery guy. He just wants everybody to get along. Great character. And we have Silencio, who carries a lot of resentment from something that happened in his childhood. And he's called Silencio because he doesn't speak. And we'll later find out why.
Okay.
So, you know, I don't want to give out any spoilers.
Right.
So we start kind of getting to know these characters through the eyes of Domingo, who's a child that wants to be a kung fu warrior. And he visits them and, you know, learns how they live. And that's how the story starts.
Wow.
And I don't want to give up any
I don't want to give too much away. Exactly. So you'll catch it on Netflix on October 3rd. So, So I work in TV animation as well. So, you know, it's a very kids animation completely different.
Yes.
Cartoon Network is where I work at. But we produce adult series too, like Samurai Jack and Primal. We have a new one coming out, very graphic for Adult Swim. But talk about the process for working with animation. When do you the first series is only just 8 episodes though, right? So did you tackle them all at once? Was it just kind of a consecutive okay? And do you jump in at like animatic stage, lock picture stage? Like when do you kind of jump in?
I was fortunate that, you know, I was able to start at the animatic stage.
Okay.
And I wanted this to be a really organic score. You know, we're paying homage to a lot of genres from the 70s.
Right.
And I think it would have been a great disservice if I had made an electronic score, right?
Yeah.
So the wonderful gift that Powerhouse Animation and Netflix and Viz Media gave me was that they just gave me free reign. They said, you know, we want you to do whatever you want to do with this. You know, have at it.
Yeah.
And so I took the reign. I took the lead for that, and I actually recorded a 26-piece string orchestra for the Weird Cues in Budapest, and we brought in a lot of wonderful performers to do the solo parts. Tina Guo is featured in a few of the cues.
Yeah, I love Tina.
She's fantastic,
yeah.
You know. She played Eru in a couple of things, and she played cello in a couple of things, and it's just awesome. You just elevated the score, right?
Yeah.
And so I was lucky in the fact that, yes, they let me start working through the animatic process. And so I was able to start, you know, kind of doing some demos in the early stages. For those who don't know, animatics is basically like a moving storyboard.
Yeah.
And the first thing that happens in animation is you record the voices.
Yes.
You know, a lot of people don't know that either.
No,
you know?
yeah,
so
it's true.
You record the voices, and the timing is very close to what's going to be in the end, right? So when you see the animatics, you kind of get a sense of the flow of the story. You hear the voices. You kind of get the sense of how the scene is blocked. And so it's a good place to start, you know, doing some sketching for music. And so what I made a decision is I'm going to write all the bigger cues for these moments that I want to do the orchestral stuff for.
Okay.
And I had, looking at the schedule, we had only about 3 weeks between, which later ended up being more like 2 weeks, but we only had about 3 weeks between when I got the last episode's animatic and the first episode's mix. So I had a short window of time to write the last few cues for the last episode and when I had to turn in the first episode, right?
Wow.
So, and I wanted to record orchestra for all of them.
Yeah.
And we didn't have an unlimited budget, so we only had a chance to record 2 days of orchestra, right? Four sessions. And so I had to work quickly the very last time, and also was taking chances because cues change, right? The scenes change from the animatic to the final. But I wrote the cues with that in mind, knowing that I'm going to have to edit sections. So I would give myself that flexibility as a composer. I would write the cues in a way that they could be trimmed here and there or extended if I needed, knowing that was going to be the case.
Absolutely.
And so, and I also wrote cues that would be malleable. Especially moments or orchestral moments that could be dropped into different cues, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And so when we recorded the orchestra, I had all that in there. Nicholas Dodd, who's a fantastic orchestrator, we've become really good friends. He helped me put together the orchestration, and he conducted the orchestra, and it came up wonderful. It was beautiful. We were able to record everything we wanted, which is amazing.
What does it feel like? I mean, hearing that music come to life, that must have been an amazing thing for you.
It's incredibly rewarding. I mean, I still get chills every time that I walk into the control room and I hear the orchestra starting to rehearse something that I've written. It's like, oh, it's so cool. It's awesome. It's an amazing feeling. It's so rewarding,
Yeah.
And then when they get it together and they're really, playing as a band, and they're, really working with the dynamics, and you feel the emotion that they're conveying. It's irreplaceable. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, live players bring so much that can't be replicated. It's just that emotion that comes through is incredible.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that Brad says the fight scenes were very important, and being that's kind of his specialty, he wanted to make sure they're very accurate. And is there a trick to scoring a fight scene? Is there do you treat the scene almost like its own 3-act thing? Is there a build to what a fight scene is in this series?
With the fights, I really let the images dictate the timing and the pacing of it. Once I get the cut of it, even after I have the sketches, when I did a little bit of fighting during the animatics.
Okay.
But I really fine-tuned them obviously when I got the final animation, because those are the ones that change the most.
Yeah.
A lot of times, depending on the fighting scene, sometimes the fight only takes 30 seconds, right? And so that's the amount of time you have to build it and to make it work. And depending what's happening on the scene, that dictates what you're going to do musically. I try to cater to the emotional content of what's happening, right? Are they losing? Are they winning? Is this life-threatening, or are they just kind of sparring, right?
Right.
All these things dictate how much depth you're going to give the music. It's not just rhythms, right?
It's not just not the pacing of the action, right?
Which it works if you want to just put a rhythm in it, but if you really want to make it engaging, you got to add the emotional background to it. So it's important to for the music to tell part of the story as well.
Yeah.
What's happening here? At what point are they turning? Are they winning? Are they losing? Are they fearing for their siblings' lives?
Right.
Things like that. And at times it's comical. The way that these guys fight, particularly Jesus. Jesus is the comic relief of the show, and so whenever he's fighting, he's doing something funny.
Yeah.
Not always, but a lot of times. So I try to accent that as well.
Yeah. So another thing that Seis Manos is doing, which I think is really cool, is when it's being released on Netflix, it'll be simultaneously available in English and Spanish dialogue, audio, which we actually just did recently with our series Victor and Valentino at Cartoon Network. Just, what does it mean to be part of a series that's kind of like representing a culture and a demographic that usually is not represented in mainstream media? Right.
Well, I mean, I think it's slowly turning, and I'm really grateful for that. This particular show, it's awesome in the fact they have 3 Hispanic protagonists, right?
Yeah.
And they're the heroes of the story. And not only that, but they have a female leader.
Yeah.
And so having a Hispanic female leader, it's unusual, and I think it's really cool, and I think it's a good milestone for representing the Hispanic community. And I'm proud to be part of that, especially as having grown in Mexico.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So kind of pulling back a little bit and just talking about your general approach. We talked about different projects and your different processes, but is there? I would like to ask composer, where does the first note come from? Is there a do you kind of go towards something to get that inspiration? Is it? I mean, it's probably different of every film, but like, do you like to talk with your director? Do you like to wait for that first cut? Do you like to, if you can, are fortunate enough, read the script if you're that early?
Yeah. With this particular show, like we talked about this, I got the original demo clip that we put together, the proof of concept, where that very first initial motif came out about. But usually, I do love to get the scripts ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because that gives me kind of an idea of the arc of the story, where things are going. The main characters are, and what emotional direction this is going to take, and trying to read between the lines too, and see what is not really being said on the page that might require some additional assistance musically. What can I add to it? Things like that. So that's kind of starts getting the wheels turning. And with that in mind, a lot of times I'll go on the piano and I'll start playing, just kind of free flow. Train of thought, just see what happens. And I'll have a recorder with me, mostly my phone.
Yeah.
And whenever it's like, oh, that's kind of cool, I'll just play it again and record it, and maybe I can build something out of that. So that a lot of the times it happens like that. Sometimes I'll be in the car driving, and I'm on a mental, I'll be thinking about the script or the story or a character, and this thing comes into my head, and I'll like, oh, I'll hum it on my phone, right?
Yeah, which I've noticed a lot of composers telling me that they keep their phone, they'll hum it really quickly in their phone. It's great for capturing those ideas.
My phone, it's got different clips of stuff that I've just thrown in there.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, because sometimes when you're not thinking specifically in musical terms, those things come to mind.
Yeah.
And I don't think if it's a minor key or if it's a this particular progression. I just kind of like, oh, this is a cool melody. Let me put it down.
Right.
And then when I go into the piano, it's like work out the chords that go with it. It's like, oh, that's cool. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Because what you latch on to as when it's a thematic score, the melody obviously is the most important part.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing that kind of evolves. Now, I was going to go someplace else here, and I'm kind of spacing on it.
No, I mean, we're talking a lot, so it's fine. But so I mean, in order to, do you need? Go ahead. Sorry.
I remember what I was going to say. For Seis Manos, one of the things that was really important for me is to really get the Chinese element right.
Right.
And because that was a particular style that I had not approached in the past. I hadn't had the opportunity to really explore that. And so what I did is, I researched a lot of the culture, I researched a lot of instrumentation, and I was really drawn by the guzheng harp, which is a horizontal harp that's tuned to the pentatonic scale. And it's a very traditional, ancient instrument that comes from China originally, literally ancient. And so I acquired one just to try it and play it, and noodling on that was the inspiration for a lot of the Chinese influenced themes in the show.
That's amazing. Because I feel like Chinese music is always represented, usually in Western films, almost stereotypically, sometimes, so it's just almost like gimmicky.
Right.
They're using it for just a gimmick thing, but the fact that you really incorporated the culture into this and mixed it in and wove it traditionally, that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
So when you need to refresh, when you need to take a break and kind of get ideas, what are some things or hobbies I guess you like to do away from music that replenish the soul?
Well, funny you should ask. I do a lot of Bikram yoga.
Okay.
For me, it's kind of important to do something outside of the studio.
Yeah, because I think people forget that you guys are in here for hours and hours and hours, and you have to manage your family time and all that, and it becomes so complicated, of course, and also take care of your own mental health. That's a big part of it.
Exactly. So that's what Bikram yoga it gives to me. It gives me a way for me to, first of all, stay in shape, because that's important, and also to keep my mind kind of, I walk into the studio into the yoga studio.
Different studio.
I walk into the yoga studio with all these worries and all these concerns and all these, anxieties, and then after going there for an hour and a half at 140 degrees and 50% humidity, doing all these exercises, I'm like over there just kind of like, what was I worried about? This is awesome, and it kind of resets my center point.
Yeah.
I get back to center after having done that, and sometimes I forget to go, or sometimes I don't have time to go, and I feel it. It does affect me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and kind of going, we're jumping around a bit, but going back to kind of working, just kind of your general approach. There's always a quote. I'm going to go quote Mr. Robert Rodríguez that always sticks with me from Rebel Without a Crew, and I've remembered it my entire life since I read it. Is I don't fear failure. I just fear failure in front of other people. And it always stuck with me. And I'm always, and as a composer, you're constantly either facing approval or rejection or everything. Do you get nervous when you have to present something in front of a director, or do you get nervous when you have to pitch to a producer or anything? I mean, how do you handle fear of rejection? Do you have fear of rejection, or do you just,
Well, I think fear is part of the process.
Yeah.
But I think once you accept that, once there's like, I'm gonna have anxiety. It's just know that you're gonna go there, and not try to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And just accept it as part of the process. Then it becomes easier to get I'm just gonna walk through it and do it. Right?
Yeah.
And what I've also learned is that rejection is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's part of the process. Yeah.
There's so many times that I've like, I lost this project, and I felt like, I'm a failure. Nobody likes me. I'm never gonna work again, right? Only to find out, 2-3 weeks later or a month later that I got another gig that was way better.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm much better suited for than the one that I didn't match.
Yeah.
And I'm coming to the philosophical perspective that if it's not meant to be, it's not going to work out, and if it's meant to be, it will. And so you don't want to work with people that you don't necessarily vibe with, right?
True. Yeah.
So I see rejection as a gift now.
Yeah.
Right? Well, this was not going to work out,
yeah.
so I'm going to let that one go.
Yeah.
And let's see what's next, right?
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So to kind of wrap up, you mentioned that you started in filmmaking and you wanted to be a filmmaker. If you could choose on a feature film set right now to be any role besides the composer, whether it's a director, whether it's the costume designer, stuntman, whatever, what would you pick?
Well, I think...
What's your passion?
I would say, directing, yeah.
Directing, yeah.
And because producing is very similar to directing. Producing music is very similar to directing. And I've done a lot of production, a lot of records. Where you're actually basically directing the singers or the players to play a certain way, and orchestrating basically what's, your vision of what the track's supposed to sound like.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's very similar to directing. Directing actors or directing singers. You're talking with creative people and trying to get the best performance out of them.
Yeah.
So for me, it feels natural. I also would say second to that, immediately second, or very close second, was cinematographer. Because I love framing, I love shooting. It's a lot of fun.
You mentioned you paint and everything, so
painting.
So I mean, you're visual too. So yeah,
exactly, all of that.
So, well, that's a fantastic answer, Carl. Thank you so much again for sitting down.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And for letting me pick your brain. And congratulations on Seis Manos. I think it's a fantastic project, and it's just
that.
Original and just kind of like it's gonna hopefully come out there and just kind of give people good like.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope people find it, because I think once people see it, they'll like it.
Yeah, and it'll be on Netflix, so hopefully people will be able to reach it easily. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, cheers again.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Kai. Great to talk to you.